Hello, I'm Nikki, a 36-year-old woman. I recently lost my father to cancer. My dad and I were inseparable when I was growing up. He was the one that I looked up to the most, and he was the one who taught me a lot of things I know about today. I'm just saying this because I want to give you a sense of just how big my loss has been for me, something that my then husband was for some reason not able to grasp. Luke and I met through a mutual friend. We went out on a blind date and happened to click really well. We shared the same interests and the same sense of humor. It came as no surprise that we began dating pretty shortly after. We dated for about 4 years before deciding to tie the knot. We wanted to have kids, but we decided that we needed to be a lot more financially secure before we did that. The first thing we bought together was this small house that had 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, a dining room, and 2 bathrooms. Nothing big, but enough for just the 2 of us and some guests. We financed the whole thing by ourselves, and to date, it has been one of my biggest achievements that I'm very proud about. I still remember the day that my mom called me and frantically told me that my dad had fainted and was being rushed to the hospital. I panicked like crazy and dropped everything I was doing to go to the hospital and be with my parents. We were in there for hours as the doctors ran test after test on my dad. He had to be admitted to the hospital, and with every hour that passed, I knew that something horrible was happening to Dad. Dad had been in hospital for 2 days before we found out that he had pretty aggressive pancreatic cancer. I felt my entire world shatter around me when we found out. I was a mess for a long while after that. Dad remained in the hospital for the next 2 months, and I kept making trips to visit him. Luke was not happy with that. I feel like you're just never at home anymore. Luke, my dad just got diagnosed with cancer and he's in the hospital. Why the hell would I not be there with him every chance that I have? You being there isn't going to cure him. Hang back a little. Let him rest. Are you implying that my being there is harming him? No, but if I was in his position, I wouldn't want to be constantly disturbed. I haven't been disturbing him at all. If you have a problem, be clear about it. I told you, I want you home more. We never spend any more time together. I miss us. You're right. I miss us too. I promise as soon as I have word that Dad's condition has stabilized, I'll take breaks between my visits, okay? All right. It took another 2 weeks before I was told that they had stabilized his condition and he was going to be all right for a little while. I began to visit Dad every other day, and even though Luke wasn't that happy with it, I figured that he could just deal with it. I was at work when my mother called me. I felt my heart pound because I didn't know what she was going to tell me, but I picked up and hoped for the best. Hey, honey. Hi, Mom. Everything all right? No, not really. I just visited your dad and there's bad news. Oh no, what is it? Well, the doctors have given your dad 2 months more to live. What? I don't know how to deal with all this. Your dad is being such a trooper about it, though. He's still the jovial man we all know and love. I don't know what I'm going to do once he's gone. Me neither. But I'll be right there after work. We'll get through this together. Yes. Get here as soon as you can. Dad really wants to see you. He apparently has something to ask of you. What is it? I don't know. He said he wanted to be the one to ask you, so he wouldn't tell me. Your father knows me way too well. Oh, okay. I'll be there in a couple of hours. Take care, Mom. Tell Dad I love him. I will, honey. I was too in shock to even sound like I was grieving. I had felt my stomach drop when my mom told me that Dad only had 2 months to live. My mind had blanked. All I wanted to do was rush over and be with my parents. I don't know how I got through the rest of the work. My boss happened to see that I was anxious and not able to concentrate. She asked me if everything was okay, and I explained my situation to her. She asked me to leave about 2 hours earlier, and I was so grateful for her. I was immediately rushed to the hospital. As I got closer to the hospital, I felt my heart race and tears spring into my eyes. Going there only made my dad dying feel more real. I had spent the entire rest of the day after my mom called in a haze, but getting to the hospital kind of shocked me awake to my new reality. When I parked in the lot, I just sat in the car for a little while and cried. I knew my dad well enough to know that he would hate to see me cry. I knew I wouldn't have been able to control myself to see him, so I got it out of my system first. I made my way over to the hospital and down the familiar hallways to my dad's room. When I got there, my mom gave me the biggest hug. We held each other for a little while before I walked into Dad's room. He looked like he had for the past month. He looked sickly and very, very thin. But the second I walked in, his eyes lit up in the same way they always had whenever I visited him. "Hey, Bon! Long time no see. Dad, I was literally here 2 days ago. A whole 48 hours since I saw my lovely daughter." "Dad, okay. How are you doing, Bon?" "Not too well. I mean, you're in a worse position, so I can't say that, can I?" "Ah, your mom told you about what the doctor says, didn't she?" "Obviously. Why wouldn't she?" "I wanted to be the one who told you." "Why would you want to be the one to tell me that you're not going to be here in 2 months?" "I don't know. Anyways, did she tell you anything else?" "Well, she did tell me that you had something to ask of me, but she didn't tell me what it was." I knew I made the right decision not to tell her. "Dad, ask me, what is it?" "Well, since I have such little time, I was thinking that it would be nice if I spent my last few days with you. Do you think I could move into your place and your mom, and I will stay with you?" "Oh, Dad, that sounds lovely. I would love to have you over. Although I can't make a decision by myself, I have to ask Luke about it." Yes, of course." I felt tears well in my eyes at the fact that my dad thought about spending time with me when he learned that he was going to die. But I didn't cry in front of him. Instead, I spent the next few hours laughing and talking with Mom and Dad. When I walked out of the hospital, I felt simultaneously heartbroken and elated. It was a confusing mixture of feelings, and I didn't exactly know how to deal with that. By the time I got back home, it was around 9 p.m. I walked into the house and was greeted by Luke, pacing back and forth in the living room. He looked worried, but when he saw me, his face turned angry. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you since 6. "I'm so sorry, darling. I went to visit my dad." "Again?" "Well, yeah, he's in hospital." "Didn't you just go see him?" "So? He's my father. My mother called to tell me that he has only 2 more months to live." "Oh, I'm so sorry. God, I'm so sorry for being so awful about it, too." "It's okay, I guess. You were worried about me." "Yeah. You weren't answering any of my calls or texts, and I freaked out. But what did you talk about with your parents?" "So, Dad had a request, but I couldn't say yes without checking in with you." "Oh? What is it?" "Well, Dad asked if he could spend his remaining days with us, as in, he wants to move in with us." "Absolutely not." "What? Why?" "Your dad is filthy rich, and he has more than enough space in his own house to stay. Why does he want to come live in our already small home and cram it up some more with all his machines?" "What is wrong with you? The man is dying. It's his last wish." "Nonsense. If he lived here, I'm more than sure that he'd have plenty more final wishes that we'd have to break our backs to fulfill. Are you actually being serious right now? Look, if he wanted to stay here, he should have contributed something towards our house payments. But from what I see, he chose to sit in his huge mansion and turn a blind eye to us. I was so angry that I didn't even know what to say. I calmly picked my things back up and drove to my parents' house. I couldn't believe the nonsense that Luke was spewing. Was that how he had always felt? Was that why he wasn't so empathetic about Dad's worsening health? Whatever it was nonsense. Luke knew firsthand how I had made it a point to never rely on my dad for any financial help once I graduated college. I had wanted to make it in the big world all by myself. I wanted to learn and grow. I didn't want Daddy's money to make my life easier. That was something I, and even my parents, are very proud of. Luke knew about all of that, but he still held resentment against my father, which was actually very stupid of him to do. If there was anyone he should be resentful of, it was me. My head was a mess after all the events of the day, so I just entered the house with my spare key and fell asleep on the couch. The next day I made it to work and somehow got through it before rushing to the hospital. I was in the same clothes as the previous day, and I knew I looked like a downright mess. My parents obviously caught on to the fact that something was really wrong. I didn't let them ask me a thing until I found out about everything, about how my dad was feeling and doing. Eventually, when the conversation came to a lull, I knew that it would be inevitable that they would ask me why I looked so disheveled. So, are we going to talk about why you've shown up looking like you just got tossed in a tornado? Dad, what? I'm allowed to say that. I'm dying. Dad, please. Okay. But do tell us what happened to you. Yeah, I also got a notification through our security systems that someone entered our house, and I checked the footage and saw you passed out on our couch. What happened? Oh, nothing big, really. Nikki, tell us. It's nothing, really. Luke and I just ended up having a little fight. Is that about what I asked you yesterday? Don't worry about it, Dad. I'll make sure you come and stay with me. If this is going to cause some problems in your marriage, I don't want that, okay? Dad, you're not going to be here for long. If my husband can't empathize with that, maybe the marriage isn't worth it. I'll talk to Luke about it again, and if he doesn't agree, we'll just move you back home and I'll live with you guys. That sounds like a better plan. Great. Now we can move on to talking about other things. I spent another hour with them before leaving. I had made up my mind at that point. I was going to talk to Luke only one last time, and if he didn't agree, then I would leave. Not only would I leave the home, but I would leave him. I was being sincere when I said that my marriage would be worthless if my husband couldn't even empathize with me over something that had already been traumatic. My dad hadn't even died, but I was already going through the works of depression and anxiety. When I got back home, Luke hadn't gotten back from work. I decided to use the time I had alone to freshen up and prepare myself to confront him. I couldn't help but feel a little crappy that, since I stormed out, Luke never made an attempt to contact me. He was so panicky about my location right before I had arrived home the previous day. But when I actually stormed off, he didn't care to check up on me. I decided to finally let the thoughts go and instead focus on what I was going to say to him. Of course, I would grovel a little, but if he was still adamant about it, I knew what I had to do. My best friend was a divorce attorney, so it wouldn't even be that hard. It sucked that I had to even be thinking of divorce, but that was what my relationship had come to. It took about another 2 hours for Luke to get back home. In those 2 hours, I decided to also be the bigger person and check on him. I called and texted him multiple times, but I never got a response. Just as my panic reached its height, He walked in through the door. He didn't pay me any mind and went straight to shower. I decided to wait for him in bed so we could have a proper conversation. When he got out of the shower, he grabbed a couple of his things and tried to make his way out of the bedroom, but I stopped him. "Hey, can we talk?" "What is it? Are you going to storm off again? Because if you are, I don't want to talk." "You know that what you said was really hurtful, right? Storming off was my way of making sure I didn't say something worse to you." "Whatever. What do you want to talk about?" "I just wanted to talk to you again about my dad staying with us." "I gave you my answer already. I'm not changing my stance on this." "Why are you so against my dad?" "I'm not against him in any way. I feel bad that he's going to die, but come on, Nikki. You see the space that we have? We're so cramped as it is." "We're absolutely not cramped. We have another bedroom. My parents could stay there." "You know that we are converting that bedroom into an office for me." "We can delay it for just another 2 months, Luke. See, it's things like this that tell me that you have something against my dad. Is it because he hasn't helped us out financially?" "I clearly told you last time that I didn't like that, didn't I?" "Yes, but you also know that I was the one who insisted that he not help me in any way." "Sure, but did you ever think about me? If your dad helped us out, I wouldn't have to break my back working so hard." "Don't act like you're the only one who's working so hard. You don't see me complaining." "Whatever. I still don't want your parents here, that's it." "I'll be staying with my family for the next 2 months. "Whatever, as long as they aren't in my house." With that, Luke left me in the room and went to sleep in the living room. I couldn't believe that he was the man I had chosen to marry. This wasn't the man who made me fall head over heels in love with him. This was a monster. I cried myself to sleep that night, and in the morning I took the day off work to pack my things up. I got to the hospital and told my parents about everything. They were obviously angry with Luke, but they were glad that I was still choosing to spend time with them. We filled out all the paperwork to take Dad home and got everything arranged to transport him there. Dad also felt really guilty for ruining my marriage, but I assured him that it was Luke who ruined the marriage and not him. Aside from spending as much time as I could with him, I also contacted my best friend who was a lawyer and had her start the filing process for a divorce. Luke barely contacted me, and the few times he did, the conversations were short. He would call to check up on me and my dad, but would seem uninterested whenever I told him Dad was doing good. The next 2 months were spent by my dad's side. My boss was gracious enough to only let me work for half the day. Mom, Dad, and I spent our time laughing and talking about the past. We played a lot of board games and watched a lot of TV. Dad constantly had a smile on his face, and that was enough to soothe all the worries of my situation. In the end, he was what mattered the most to me, and nothing would change that. During the last 2 weeks of his life, his health deteriorated rapidly. It was painful and jarring to see my dad slowly lose his spark. Mom and I spent every night curled up in bed in each other's arms, just crying about the inevitable loss we were going to face. And then, finally, one night, Dad passed away in his sleep. Mom and I were heartbroken. Mom way more than me. So I took over planning the funeral and informing everyone in Dad's life about his passing. Of course, I also had to inform Luke, but I decided to do that in person. My aunt had flown in, and she stayed with my mom while I went over to my place to meet Luke. Before going over, I decided to pick up the divorce papers. I knew that once the funeral was done and everything was beginning to settle, I wanted to start afresh. I didn't want to have to deal with more things after I had made peace with my dad's death, so I figured I might as well deal with everything at once. When I got back home, Luke was watching TV. He looked surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" "Well, it's my house too." "Yes, but you were staying with your parents. Is your dad doing all right?" "No, he passed away yesterday." Oh no, I'm sorry for your loss. Are you? If you really were, you would have honored the one thing he asked for. Your dad is dead now, Nikki. Drop it. You really are an insensitive piece of crap, aren't you? Okay, I know you're deep in grief right now, so I'm not going to hold what you say against you. Anyways, wasn't your dad going to leave you like, what, $5 million to your name? What are we going to do with that? Are you actually out of your goddamn mind? Your dad finally decided to contribute to our life, so I think it's fair that I'm planning what we'll do with it. Oh, I'm definitely doing something with it. I'm divorcing you. Here. What? Come on, Nikki, you can't divorce me right as my life is getting good. You're a jerk. Sign it fast. I want to be done with you as quickly as I can. Luke tried to talk to me, but I was seething. I walked back out and drove back to my mom. She figured I went back home to Luke because I was crying and looked really angry. She tried to ask more about it, but I told her that I'd tell her everything after we're done with the funeral. The funeral was held in the next 2 days, and it was truly a very emotional moment for everyone. It felt so nice to see just how loved my dad was by everyone in his life. Mom and I were showered with love and company, and in a way, I got to reconnect with a lot of family. The next few months were filled with dealing with the grief while simultaneously going to court. Why go to court, you ask? Well, Luke did not take me asking for a divorce nicely, so he decided to contest it. He kept trying to fight for some of my inheritance because he believed that he was entitled to it. But my dad had made a pretty specific and ironclad will that stated that only I was to be the inheritor. Obviously, Luke didn't win anything. He only lost more on hiring a lawyer. So Luke sold his share of our house to me because he wouldn't be able to survive by himself and pay his share of the mortgage. I gladly bought it, and I'm currently working on flipping it so I can rent it. My mom and I are slowly getting through the grief of losing the one person who brought so much light and joy into our lives. Mom is finally beginning to laugh again, and I'm beginning to see the bright side of things. I've moved in with Mom, and having each other there next to each other has been a great feeling. It's been about 7 months since everything happened, and things are finally beginning to look up. The money Dad left me surely has helped, but I'm not going to rely on it as long as I work. So much has happened in less than a year, so I can't wait to see what else life has left to offer me.